Welcome everyone. Today I want to talk about writing our code using like GitHub Copilot within RStudio, as well as some R packages that allow you to use GitHub Copilot from within R. Sorry, I just got a message from Zoom saying that foreground camera now works. So I have the notes over here. I'm going to go over a bunch of R packages. However, there's something you do need to do from outside R, which is you're going to have to download this ellmer tool and install it on your computer. Once you're able to do that, you're going to be able to install the ellmer R package, as well as use that R package to download one of the LLMs called Gamma 3.2. Cool. So if you want to start running some of these commands on the background, please go ahead. Now, while you install these R packages, I'm going to talk about the GitHub Education Pack. So the GitHub Education Pack is something that GitHub provides if for students, teachers, some schools, and partners. The idea of this GitHub Education Pack is that it allows you to get access to what is called GitHub Pro. GitHub Pro is a service that you can pay for otherwise. That gives you access to like unlimited repositories, gives you 3,000 action minutes, GitHub action minutes for private repositories. It also allows you to have like larger packages and stuff. Something else that GitHub Education gives you access to is GitHub Copilot, which is their AI-powered coding companion, and is what I'm really going to be talking about today. So in order to get access to GitHub Copilot, if you're a student, a teacher, and that means actually having like a student ID and an email from an academic institution, you're going to be able to apply for the GitHub Education Pack. So here it says join GitHub Education. It will open a link where you're going to be able to say like, hey, I'm a student. At some point, you're going to be able to basically upload a photo of your student ID. So since several people at Libre Institute are actually students at Hopkins or at University of Cambridge or LCG UNAM undergrad program in Mexico, there are several people here that will going to be able to get GitHub Education, get their GitHub Education pack approved. In my case, I have it also approved because I'm a teacher. So those are some of the things you're going to be able to do. In order to actually complete this application successfully, your GitHub account, you're going to have to link it to at least one of your academic emails. So like an email from Hopkins, or any of these other institutions where you're officially linked to. So like all these links here are for like applying for that. I think we have some colleagues from, I think it's Northwestern University. If I got that right. Anyways, there's a lot of us have different academic ties, so you might be able to apply for that. Now, let's say that you are not a student, not a teacher, none of these things. Well, are you like out of luck? Until recently, that was mostly the case. But Nick actually helped me test this. So there's something called GitHub Copilot free, which if we check the documentation here, how do you get GitHub Copilot free? You basically can get it if you are a student teacher, which are the things we were just talking about, but also if you're an open source maintainer. The The definition of how this is made is a little bit fuzzy to me, but I assume that you must basically be making GitHub commits to an open source repository that GitHub automatically detects as being open source, probably due to the license file that you have. Also, the repository being public instead of private, and a few other things. So I don't know how many commits you have to contribute before you're actually considered an open source maintainer. Now, this GitHub Copilot Pro or free is nice in a few ways, but it's basically going to allow you to use it. It's going to have some limits of like 2,000 completions per month or like 50 chat messages per month. That is actually pretty generous, I would say. So if we go back to this part of Copilot Free, it says it's not available. So it's like a negation if you have free access to GitHub Copilot Pro because you're an open source maintainer. So as an open source maintainer, you can get Copilot Pro for free. That's what I'm understanding. But then also you might also, in addition, get access to Copilot Free overall. So there's the two versions of it, the one with the limit, the one with no limits. Sounds like you can use it at least for free for some time. So thanks to that change that I recently became aware of, I decided to teach about how to integrate RStudio with GitHub Copilot. Now, so I already spoke about the limits. There's another page of the documentation from GitHub that says that you can basically check if you have GitHub Copilot by going to your profile. Then you're going to see like a little page called GitHub Copilot Pro, and that will tell you whether you have access to it or not. So if I go to github.com, you go to your profile over here. There's your Copilot menu, and there you can see like, do you have access to GitHub Copilot Pro or free or something else. In my case, I do have access to it thanks to the GitHub Education Pack that I was mentioning before. You're going to see a bunch of other options. Basically, all of mine are default options except this one, where by default it's disabled, but I want to get access to the latest model called Claude 3.5 Sonnet, which I've seen in different websites that is actually pretty much better at writing code than other ones. That's the only difference that I have. Now, this URL over here at the top, the one for like going to your profile and clicking on Copilot, is actually github.com/settings/Copilot, which is the link that I put over here. Once you've verified you have access to GitHub Copilot, either Pro or free, you are going to be able to start using some of these things. So there's this website over here from Posit, formerly RStudio, that explains how you can link your RStudio IDE to your GitHub Copilot account. You have to have an RStudio window open, which I'll do over here. Well, you already have one from a course. You can go to Tools, Global Options. Then you'll notice you have to have like a recent version of RStudio for this to show up. You're going to notice at the very bottom of the menu on the left, there's this Copilot option there. I'm already signed in, but if you haven't signed in, you're going to have to click on the sign in button. It's going to open this dialog, or it's going to give you a code. Then you have to go to github.com/login/device, paste the code that you got, click continue, and that will authorize your GitHub Copilot plugin on RStudio. Once you have that, you're going to be basically logged in like I am over here. And the only non-default option that I have enabled is this index project files with GitHub Copilot. Um, 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 cool. You can also change how frequently you want these coding suggestions to pop up. So this is like if you have been idle on the keyboard after like 300 milliseconds, it will start like showing suggestions. You might want to increase this if you're using GitHub Copilot free and only have like 2,000 suggestions per month. So, or you can make it like, hey, I want to get like these suggestions manually. For you press Control and backslash as a keyboard shortcut to actually get the suggestions. So there's a few options there. Now, GitHub Copilot has a lot of these LMMs. They're trained on data. Like sometimes we don't really know what data that was trained on. GitHub Copilot, I think, was trained on a lot of like open source repositories, which is a little bit of why they actually offer GitHub Copilot Pro for free to open source maintainers. I think that's the reasoning there. Now, you're not really supposed to use GitHub Copilot or any of these tools. You're writing code that you want to then patent later. So that's not really going to be the case for any of our open source code that we're writing, but you have to keep that in mind. And there's like a bunch of documentation about that that you can read. Now, how is this going to look once you have it enabled in RStudio? So over here, there's some code like this library dplyr line 1, empty cards being piped into group by, being piped into summarize. The person over here wrote mean equals mean, parenthesis MPG, comma. Then the next line they wrote, they just press enter. And after those 300 milliseconds, or depending on whether you have like the where you want like completion to be shown to you manually, where you press Control backspace, you're gonna get these two lines over here, 1 and 2. So let's see what they are. So 1 here is a comment that actually this person wrote, where they say like add the standard error. So this is something they actually typed. Now, after a few seconds, GitHub Copilot will be able to, and I start typing std error underscore error. GitHub Copilot will say like, oh, based on the context that you were like trying to compute the mean, and then you provided this comment that you want the standard error, plus you're creating a variable called std error. So it's like an informative name of a variable. Then it will like say like, oh, actually, then the code you want based on what you're writing here in summarize is you want to compute the standard deviation of this MPG variable that you have over here divided by the square root of the sample size. So this section over here, which is in light gray, this is the suggestion that you're getting from GitHub Copilot. You'll also see here at the bottom some messages telling you like what's the current status of GitHub Copilot. So whether like it's actually sending some information to GitHub Copilot and is waiting for a response, or in this case, the response has actually been received. So that way you can tell like what's actually GitHub Copilot doing behind the scenes, like if you're waiting for a prompt or something like that. So it's actually pretty neat. You can think about it as an enhanced autocomplete. Now, let's here provided a screenshot of the settings I have. Let's actually try this out on a new project. So I'll go to File, New Project. Directory. I'm gonna put it on my list. So here you can see that I have the version from 2024 from December, which is a recent version. So I'll use R, create a I forgot to provide a name. I'll create this R script over here, and let me, for example, here I'm going to put a comment. You can see that Copilot was quickly waiting for a suggestion, and it said like actually no completions are available because it's can't really suggest anything with just like an empty comment. So I'll say like here, like at this point, Copilot is telling me he's waiting for completions. So it's like querying some information based on the comment that I have so far. Let's see if it gives me a suggestion. Oh, there it goes. Well, here it didn't provide me much, it just said like library here. It's like thinking like, hey, maybe you want to use the PESA package after using here. That's just like an automatic suggestion. So there's things like that that it will do. Now, something that is a little this is a command there which says like here returns the path to the root of the project. Like it's already suggesting that. So I'll just type here. Then it's like giving me more comments. So it's actually constructing a little bit of like this help file. I'll just press tab to like accept the auto completion from GitHub Copilot. Let's see what else it suggests. If it suggests anything else. Like, hey, maybe you want to like load my data CSV from the data directory. This, I don't have actually that data directory or my data.csv, so like that command is not really going to work. I mean, it does point to a path, but like is not actually a file that I have, right? So it has some limitations. Now, something that like maybe is not as obvious is let's say I have here this comment. It's an example for using the here package, and then I do have like the library here command. Later on, I'm gonna just start translating. In this case, Spanish, and I just translated the first few words, and then it detected I was translating a comment that I already had before. This can be quite useful if you speak more than one language and you are giving comments from someone else, and you just want to translate the whole comment. You can do that by just typing the first few words of the comment that was like in English in this case, and then it will autocomplete in Spanish, or vice versa. You can write your full comment in Spanish, and then start translating example of, and then it will like translate. Like it will make some mistakes in the translation, etc. But like overall, it's pretty good. A lot of times, if you're writing like the same lines of code, let's say you're using like let's say object one. Some function with like argument A. Sorry, let me call this foo. Some function foo. And then you say like object two with argument B. Like it will detect like, oh, now you actually want objects tree with argument C, right? So if you're, like ideally you want to be looping through a function instead of like copy pasting the same line of code a bunch of times and then editing it. But if you're actually having to do that, like Copilot will do a pretty good job with that. So those are some of the the features. This part about translating is actually fairly sweet. And it can be, it doesn't have to be a .r file. It will be able to translate things that you're writing in any other file that you have open in RStudio. So that works pretty well. Now, since now we have access to GitHub Copilot, now we can start now using R packages that actually interact with the API from GitHub Copilot in different ways. So one of those packages is called the chattr package. Chattr, you'll see here, is developed by Edward Ruiz, who's has been an employee of RStudio, now called Posit, for quite a few years now, maybe 8 or so years. That's a guess there. But Edward Ruiz is part of the Posit group that is developing the ML verse, the machine learning verse. So a lot of you are probably familiar with like the tidyverse. Posit has been developing this ML verse too. And so chattr is one of those packages. I'm going to go to mlverse.github.io/chattr. And it's going to allow us to work with different LLMs. You can work with OpenAI, Llama GPT, GitHub Copilot, Databricks, and a few other things. All of them have different setup instructions. The easiest of them is being GitHub Copilot if you're already using RStudio, because basically chattr is going to be able to use that those settings that you have already. OpenAI or like some of these other tools, you're going to have to create like an API key, but actually that means that like you have to pay OpenAI to get like X number of tokens, etc. So if you have access to GitHub Copilot, which a lot of us have now, you're going to be able to use this for free and test chattr that way. Each of these LLMs have different advantages, disadvantages, etc. But at least the main one I would say is like the other option you have to pay for. This one is free for us. So we're going to use the free for us option. So it has a few different functions, chattr, but one of the functions it has is called chattr app. So I'm going to run that over here. Chattr is going to automatically detect what are the models they have available, that you have access to. In my case, I only have access to the GitHub Copilot one, so I'm going to select that selection number 1. And what this is really doing is it's running like a type of like you can think about it as a small shiny app on the viewer panel of RStudio. And so now here you can paste some prompts. So I have a few examples already ready. So I'm like, show me how to use the R package. Minimize that one. So you can type a few prompts over here. Click on the submit button, and then you're gonna get like some output. In this case, it's saying like, for some reason, it's telling us you need to load the tidy models, the tidyverse package, to load here. That's actually not true. So you don't need to load those 2 packages to load the here package. But then they say like, well, you can find the path to a data set, then read it with like, if you have access to it, then display the few first lines. This code technically is correct, but like we're not going to have that file, right? But at least it gives you an idea. Another thing we were looking at in the class I'm teaching is, for example, the grepl function. Just going to click here. And it provides us an example of using the actually, in this case, it returned incorrect code for me. Okay, now this works. So it actually provides here an example of where you're using the grepl function. before I exit this chatter, just there's some settings where like there is here like an actual prompt where you can change some of like the behavior of chatter. So it's like in this case on the prompt they're telling you like please use like information from this Tidy Modeling with R book, the R for Data Science book. So you're already providing some sources of information, so you can change that. You can also send up to 10 data frames or 10 data files in each interaction with like GitHub Copilot through the prompt. So this actually sequesters your R session. So I'm gonna stop this by pressing escape. Boom. And so the grepl example, I was showing it because if you check the base grepl function, is basically what I was showing you already. I'm just being more explicit over here. If you check the help file for it, on the examples, there's like tons of examples over here. There's a lot of them, but none of them use the grepl function. So you could be like, well, okay, maybe I can use GitHub Copilot in this case to get an example, so I can understand how that function works. That's maybe one use case of using the chatter function. Now, it will also take inputs in Spanish. So like here, this is just the same thing of like showing me how to use the here package, but in Spanish. But like the first time I ran this, the comments were in English. And so then the second time I ran it was like, look, please put like the comments in Spanish. So those are things you can try. Now, of course, you might want to just use like your browser and open like something like Barth, which is now called Gemini. And then there you can ask some things already to Gemini or Barth. So like here, for example, show me how to use the summarized experiment package. And it's going to, provide like a lot of information, how to install it, what it does, etc. Some of the main functions for it, some examples. Another one I have is like, how do you download data with Recon tree? Since I'm teaching how to use the Recon tree package in this course, like here is using this ID SRP009615. If we scroll all the way to the bottom, close that welcome thing. And it says like, what are the sources? One of the sources is the quick start guide that I wrote myself for Recon tree. So like, that's why like in that quick start guide, I'm using that study ID as example. So it's actually reusing some documentation I wrote myself to like, but like also information from a few other sources to like collate all of that into some something that maybe is digested enough, but also like a more detailed than like we're getting with the prompts from GitHub Copilot. So you might want to use Gemini or like Bing or some other of these tools. Now, you can actually use Gemini from R, and there's a specific package for that called gemini.R. I haven't used it myself because you have to create an API key. But I've seen that this package is quite liked by people. So if you want to use Gemini directly from your programming session, that's one way you could do it. But another package that has been around for maybe a year or so is the ellmer package, and it was developed by Hadley Wickham. This package, ellmer, basically allows you to interact with a bunch of APIs from different AIs, including Gemini. So you can chat with Gemini, but you can also chat with GitHub using this chat GitHub function. So again, like, OpenAI, a few other things you can also interact with. Some of them, maybe you have to pay for them. But since we have free access to GitHub, I'm just going to copy this code over here into a script over here. So, I mean, it's fairly easy to install. ellmer is available from CRAN. You load it, and then there's this function called chat GitHub. I want to save it as a chat object. And then they have this function called live console that works with any chat. And basically now your R console became like how you can interact with the prompts. So you can ask questions like this, like, what is my name? And it will tell you like, well, I don't actually have access to your personal information. You can ask like, who created R, or like any other question you might ask, like Google. And in this case, it provides like 2 paragraphs of information about like who created R. There's also this other one that I have of like how many bioconductor packages are there right now, and it's going to tell us that the data that this was last trained on is from October 2023. So it doesn't know the exact answer for right now, but then it provides you some code that you can write to actually get the number of packages and stuff. The way you exit this prompt is by pressing the Q letter. You type in the Q letter in capital, and you go back to R. You could also use it as like chat. Like I'm using it as chat because that's the object name, but then $chat, that's how you would interact with the chat programmatically. So if you don't want it to sequester your session, that's how you can also work with it with ellmer. And so ellmer can work with a bunch of LMMs, but again, we have free access to GitHub Copilot. Now there's this experimental package called PAL made by Simon. Simon Couch works also at Posit. And the idea of this is a package that builds on top of ellmer, where you're using ellmer to interact with like an LMM, but then instead of like copy pasting the code that you got back from ellmer, like working that code, etc., into something you can execute, this package does that for you, and it has 3 like super advanced prompts. So right now I'm typing like not a lot of stuff, sorry, I'm trying to remember where the prompts are. Yeah, here. So for example, there's this clear replace prompt. This is like, I'm gonna scroll for it, like long, right? like Simon wrote like this super complicated prompt that like GitHub Copilot is able to interpret and give you some code back. And what this prompt is about is to help you transition if you're a developer of an R package, to change your code from using the stop function or which is a base R function, the warning function from base R, or message function from base R, as well as the rlang abort function, or rlang warn, or rlang inform functions, into the CLI versions of CLI abort, CLI warn, CLI inform. Simon, he recently wrote a blog post over here. There you go. Where he like explains like the motivation for making all of this. Part of what he said is like at Posit they have a spring cleaning session where the idea is that they spend a week to like update their R packages to like the latest technologies. And CLI, for example, is this R package that provides super nice messages for your users and stuff, a lot nicer than like the base R messages or like the rlang messages. So since Simon and others were doing this across a bunch of packages, he wrote this super complicated prompt and this PAL package that allows you to like have some code selected, and basically it will update it for you. Now, I'm having some troubles with it because in theory, you have some code like this, or like I'm using R-lang board, and you have PAL installed. You just select the code and go to add-ins. You'll see it over here, PAL. And then you can say like, I want to use, in this case, the CLI one. And that should like update the code, but nothing's happening. So I don't know why that is. And I made a GitHub issue about it. Simon already replied to me and he wants more information, which I'll provide soon. Now, there's another way that you can use PAL, like instead of through the RStudio add-in, you can load the package PAL and say like, what is the function that, what is the LLM that you're going to use in this case? Since I only have access to GitHub Copilot, I'm going to use the chat GitHub function from the ellmer package. And then I'm going to say like, hey, I want to initiate a PAL using the Roxygen prompt that they have. And so then I'll be able to access it via the chat function, just like the $ chat, just like ellmer once you can access to the chat, $ chat thing, accessor. And inside quotes, I'm going to provide some code here. So like in this case, I'm providing a function called like just foo that takes the argument ola and prints it. This will return code that I just want to be able to visualize. So I'm going to use the cat function to visualize it. And so what this is doing is you provided some code and now it's returning like the Roxygen syntax for documenting that function. So PAL right now has 3 PALs implemented, one for updating your functions to use the CLI package. Another one is for creating the documentation using Roxygen syntax. And then the third one is, sorry, I'm getting the name right now. The third one is, for like using test that. So like if you want to change some of your tests and stuff. So like all these, you can actually use the PAL package and like write like super complicated prompts, and you'll be able to use it. Exactly how you develop these prompts, how you provide like as much information for GitHub Copilot to do the right thing is something that I would need to like spend more time learning about. So that's a PAL package. Now there's more stuff that you might be interested in. I mentioned MLverse, which is part of Posit. Well, they have like an AI blog on Posit where they introduce packages. You'll see like Edward Rees, like the person I mentioned earlier, has actually written several of these entries on the AI blog from Posit. That's one way you can learn things. We saw that like there's MLverse itself, so you can go to like the GitHub repository for the MLverse organization and see what are all the packages there. And like one of them that I found there is the mul package. So this one, the examples that they provide is you have some reviews, some text. You can use the mul package to basically perform sentiment analysis to say like, is that review positive, negative, neutral, and stuff like that. That's the example that they provide here for the mul package. So that's like more specific programming tasks, not really like writing code, but like actually analyzing some data with the mul package. But built on top of mul is a package that I thought in particular for anyone that speaks more than one language. Sorry, there's a package that I thought was going to be really interesting or useful for people that speak more than one language, and that's the lang package. The idea of this LAN package is that it allows you to automatically translate help files. So let's say that you're not a native English speaker. The ellem function is only officially documented in English. But if you want to translate it on the fly, you can translate it with this LAN package. And like in this case, they have a screenshot of how it was translated to Spanish. So this doesn't surprise me that they developed this, because Edward Ruiz was actually quite helpful to the people from South America that were trying to translate some key packages. I'm forgetting right now what was the name of the package that they were trying to translate, like all the documentation. But there was an effort with like a bunch of volunteers, people checking all of that. Translations, you have to actually add specific files that have the translations into your R packages. So it's quite an effort to do that. And so like now with these LLMs, you can automatically translate on the fly. That's pretty good. You can also use this LAN package. You want to help translate your documentation files into, let's say, Spanish or other things. But at that point, you're going to have like two documentation files, which means like you make a change to your function, you're going to have to make sure that you update it in both languages or three languages, or whatever languages you have. So as an example of this, a bunch of steps here that I'm going to simplify. So in order to use LAN, you have to actually have mall installed. In order to actually use mall, you have to have this ellmer installed, which is a piece of software that you have to install in your computer, because you're going to use the ellmer package to download an LLM. They recommend Llama 3.2. They say that it has worked pretty well for code. So I've already done those things. And then you're going to be able to install Lang at that point. So I already have Lang installed. I already went through all of those steps. So I want to load Lang. I want to tell it to use from Llama the Llama 3.2. I'm going to set it a seed for all of this. And if I try to translate a file, well, it didn't translate anything. Why is that? Well, in my case, what is my language for my computer? It's English. And so since it detects that the original text is already in English, it doesn't try to translate it. Now, you can tell it with the sys set environment variable, you can tell it that like, hey, now my language is Spanish. And if I do that, now run the question mark LM, we can see here that it's translated the title. It's going to then translate like other parts of the help file. And this is taking like, 5-10 seconds already, maybe 15. So, I mean, the LM function is quite a long function with a lot of documentation. So it's going to take maybe 20-25 seconds total to fully translate it. That's the one drawback, but eventually it did translate it. And so now here it says like the title is in Spanish, the description, all of this in Spanish. The documentation of each of the arguments is in Spanish. The details is also in Spanish, value section in Spanish. The author section is still in English, so it doesn't translate that. It doesn't translate the references. The see also section was translated, and examples are still in English. So this is like, ideally you will want these comments to be translated, but it like gets you like, really close to completion. How good is the translation? So since this is, in my case, I'm using, overall, I would say it's a pretty decent translation. I was going to say, like, since in this case, I'm using GitHub Copilot, and that's what I've been using to translate comment. I already know that like the translation is pretty decent, but actually here's, this is not using GitHub Copilot. This is using this Llama 3.2. Yeah, so like in 2009, I taught a course where like I made like all the actually 2008 to 2009 I taught 3 courses where I made like all the material available in English and Spanish. But in particular in 2009 I taught a long course about bioconductor. And for 4 or 5 years after that, I would get emails from people that only spoke Spanish asking me questions because back then there was not a lot of documentation in Spanish for R. Um, so language can become like a pretty high barrier for people who are trying to learn how to code because most of the documentation is going to be written in English. Um, um, so this lang package is pretty useful. If you want to do this more permanently, you could like actually make sure that your environment variable is Spanish. Like if your computer is already configured to be in Spanish, maybe you don't have to do that, but you probably would need to like load the lang package and like use this LMM as part of your edit profile. The disadvantage is that like as any help file that you ask some questions about will have to will have to be translated. And it can take a bit of time. Cool. So if you want more, nowadays I would recommend to use the RStats hashtag on Blue Sky to check things. There's also a feed called the RStats feed that you can add to your home on Blue Sky. Basically, it filters anything that has the RStats hashtag. So like on my home, I have this RStats feed. The feeds in Blue Sky, they're like algorithms, and you can add any of them by going into your home. And then you'll see here this pound sign, and you can add feeds. So in this case, I have the RStats feed as one of my feeds. From looking at that, that's how I found out about like this recent message on Blue Sky from 3 days ago. And like, I mean, they're talking about a few other things, but like, you can see here, like they have like the MLverse hex, the mol hex, the pol hex, the ellmer hex, the gemini.R hex. This is the llama hex, and Yama. So there's a lot of new tools, and people are learning how to use them. Another example was this one from Simon Couch, which I already showcased earlier about like this blog post that Simon wrote that I haven't fully finished reading, but this is where he explains why he made the pol, ensure, or like, I'm not sure if he was the one that made them all, but like why the pol, ensure, and gander packages were made. These are all like experimental R packages. And so they're trying to see like how much can you push the LMMs, how much can you make them really helpful for you, right? So there's more to learn here, and I'll report back to Simon to try to get this CLI thing working from the PAL package. I'm not sure why it's not working for me right now. Well, like the GitHub plugin, why that's not working, which is what makes it a lot easier to run. Okay, so that's all I had for today, and really, thank you, Nick, for testing that you do have access to GitHub Copilot without having the GitHub Education Pack, because I had been meaning to talk about this for a few months, but I was like, oh, I don't want to talk about something that none of you can use unless you pay for it. But now we know that you can actually use this for free. Cool. So thank you very much.